Hey, what's up guys? So today I've got the Tamron 150 to 600 millimeter lens that I want to review for you. Now this is a lens that I've wondered about for a long time because with such a long focal range, I was curious as to what kind of image quality I could actually get out of this thing. And I gotta tell you, I was pretty impressed. Is it the best performing lens on the market? Absolutely not. Is it a good lens for under $1,000 that can help you to get some decent sports shots and some decent wildlife shots? Yes, it can, as long as you understand the limitations of the system. So first thing that I noticed right out of the box, this thing is incredibly lightweight for being a 150 to 600 millimeter lens. And it has a very long focal range. I mean, when you are using this thing, people are going to notice you. But it was easy enough that I was able to handhold this thing for about 5.5, 6 hours at a track meet, shoot all day. I was a little bit tired by the end of the day, but that's mostly just because I'm really out of shape. But I was able to handhold it, get some really solid images with it. Even with runners running directly at me, this thing did a pretty good job of keeping focus and getting some solid shots, but it wasn't perfect. I had some misses with this thing. I had some shots that fell out of focus, some shots that were soft, things like that. It struggled to focus at times. This lens primarily struggled in focusing for me in overcast situations, heavily overcast situations. At the track meet, the sun was going in and out of from behind the clouds. And when it was behind the clouds, it did struggle some with like darker uniforms that didn't really have any real clear, team emblems or anything like that for it to lock onto and focus with. I shot this exclusively with the 5D Mark III, which is an older camera system, doesn't have the best autofocus system in the world. It is adequate, but it is getting a bit old. With a newer camera, it probably would have performed a little bit better, but I did have some struggles with it focusing when it was overcast. The next day I went out to go shoot some wildlife, try to shoot some birds. It was completely overcast. I mean, it was dark out there. I was shooting at like ISO 2000 during the daytime, and that was just to give me like a 1600 shutter speed. And this thing was really struggling to focus on like dark birds against the dark clouds and stuff like that. It was hunting. I had a few situations where it just would not focus on anything. I literally could not get it to focus on the side of a mountain. I had to pick an object that was about 10 feet away from me, focus on it, get it to focus, and then it would go just fine again. But I noticed in those overcast situations where there's not a lot of contrast in the scene, it really did struggle to autofocus. It wasn't impossible, but it was a lot harder. But in well-lit situations at the track meet when the sun was out, it didn't struggle hardly any at all. For the most part, it was fairly responsive. It's not the fastest autofocus system for photographing like sports like football where you're going to have to transition from person to person quickly. You're going to miss some shots because the autofocus just isn't as fast as some other lenses on the market, like a 300 2.8 or a 400 f4. It's just not going to be that fast, but it's got this enormous focal range that it has to go through to find your subject and focus on it. So it's to be expected, but is it usable for shooting those things? Yes, it is. One of the things that I like about this extreme focal range is that even though you may miss some shots because it's slow to focus, you're going to gain a lot of shots that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get. For example, if you're shooting, let's say baseball, you're going to be able to reach out into the outfield and get shots with this, shots that you wouldn't be able to get with even a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, or definitely not with the 300 millimeter lens. You just wouldn't have the reach really to get out there to get decent shots. With this, you will have that reach and you'll be able to gain shots from extra parts of the field, even something like football. I used the Sigma 150 to 600. I shot some youth football last season, and I was just able to pretty much stay in the end zone and camp out all the way up to the 50-yard line before I even had to move, because I had half the entire football field that I could cover without even having to move with this focal range. So it opens up your shot selection tremendously when you're photographing like sports and even wildlife. If you're in good light, the autofocus system is going to work very well. If you're dealing with low light or low contrast situations, heavily overcast days, it is going to struggle, but it still was able to lock on and get me a lot of usable shots. In terms of sharpness, it's adequately sharp, especially when it nails focus. Like I said, I had some images that were a little bit soft, but when you're shooting at 600 millimeters, even though this is an f6.3 lens at 600 millimeters, your depth of field isn't all that great. It's not a very large depth of field. So when subjects are moving towards you, it's very easy for this thing to just misfocus just that much and give you a little bit of a soft image. But for the most part, it kept up and it did very well. The vibration reduction on here, it actually worked really well. I was actually pretty surprised with it. When you're shooting, typically whenever I shoot sports, I don't even worry about vibration reduction or image stabilization because I'm usually using a fast enough shutter speed that it's a non-issue. But when you're shooting at 600 millimeters, it does not take a lot of camera shake to ruin your image. And with the vibration reduction, it just reduced that camera shake down on those handful of occasions where I was shooting with a slower shutter speed. One of the things that this camera has that will speed up your autofocus is it has a focus limiter switch here. So you can be from 2.2 meters to 10 meters if you plan on just only photographing things in that range. You've got 10 meters to infinity if you know that everything's going to be more than 10 meters away, or you have the full option. I shot exclusively on the full option, but if I had used the focus limiter, it would have sped up my autofocus. But because I was just shooting at a variety of different focal lengths, I just didn't change it, and I didn't want to forget to change it. So I just left it at full. You also have 3 different modes for your vibration control. I didn't use them. I really didn't do any panning shots or anything like that. I just left it in mode number 1, and it worked just fine for me. The tripod mount on this is pretty sturdy. It's very heavy duty. It would work well for mounting on like a monopod or something like that for shooting, which I had wished that I actually took mine to the track meet, even though it is light enough to handhold. After 5.5 hours, I was getting tired of holding it, but it would have helped to steady my shots and things like that. But like a dummy, I walked off and left my monopod. So overall, I got to tell you, this is not the best lens in the world, but if you're on a budget, you want to shoot sports or wildlife, you want a ton of reach, this is definitely the way to go. Something like the Tamron or the Sigma. I will have a review of the Sigma coming out here soon as well. The images are, in my opinion, adequately sharp. The autofocus is usable, even if it's not the best in the world, not the fastest, not the most accurate. You're going to end up with some misses, but you're just going to gain so much shot selection that, to me, these things are definitely worth it. Coming in at under $1,000, they're bargains. They're lightweight. These things are easy to, if you needed to lug them around for a hike or all-day shooting sports, they're just great lenses, and they feel fairly high quality. They feel well built, even though they're lightweight. I don't feel like anything on this Tamron lens is cheap or unusable. So I hope that helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions about this lens or anything else, leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.